Well, hello everyone, and thank you for watching once again. Today I'm out here in beautiful southern Arizona, and this is a much requested video that I'm about to do here. This is going to be my comprehensive cage trapping demo, and I'm also going to be running through the different kinds of equipment that I use. So it's going to be a full comprehensive video. Hope you guys enjoy it, stick around, and without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so before we get into the video, I really want to give you guys a quick disclaimer and just tell you that when I'm doing this, this is definitely, I think, helpful, and I think this will be full of plenty of useful tips for when you're out on the trap line. But the best way to learn about trapping and to improve at it is to actually go out there yourself and fail and realize what doesn't work for you, and then find also what does work for you. That's the most impactful way I think you can learn trapping, the quickest way you're going to learn trapping. And it's really important to go out there and do it yourself, because everybody's trapping area is different. Some are desert, some are forest, and you've got everything in between. So it's really important to go out there yourself and figure out what's going to be working best for you. Without further ado, I'm definitely going to give you plenty of tips, and hopefully those will be applicable to wherever you're from, whatever environment you are. But I do want to make sure the disclaimer is made that this is specifically what I find useful, and it might not work for every area that you try to trap. Alright, so first things first, I'm going to go through some of the equipment that I like to use. This is pretty much just the bed of my truck. This is how it looks during trapping season. This right here is something that I don't normally bring out to the cage when I'm about to set it, but this is stuff I always like to have in the truck as a trapper. So just decent sized bin here, full of different stuff that I use. I do a little bit of foothold trapping, so I've got a drag and some chain. Not important really as a cage trapper. Something that I do think is important for cage trappers, especially if you're in areas where there could be people around, is a set of cables. What I have here is just a cable here with a larger loop and a smaller loop. What you can do with this, there's so much versatility you can use with this, but what I like to do is, if I'm near a tree or something, I'll run this through the mesh on my cage trap, and then I'll attach one of my locks, and that way I have a little bit more assurance that I'm not going to have a theft on the trap line. And I also, to that point, I have some earth anchors. I don't think I have anything with me right now, but normally I like to have a set of earth anchors as well, that you can use a driver and a hammer to knock that into the ground if there, for example, isn't any trees around and the soil would be stable enough to hold that in there. That's another way that you can protect your cages. There's a couple of pictures hopefully on the screen now showing how I use that, and I find that very helpful. So a driver and a hammer, so these, and then I use an array of varying cables so that I can lock my cages up to trees or down into the ground. And that's not going to prevent all theft, but it's definitely going to, I think, help in a lot of different cases. I always have an extra couple of pairs of gloves. These are the gloves that I'm using, and these are the gloves that I will have in my trap bag as well. I like them. They're just garden gloves, got rubber, and I just like the feel of them. So when you're using equipment, a big part of it is finding stuff that's comfortable for you, because you're going to be putting in hundreds of sets, assumably per trapping season. So it's always good to be comfortable with the equipment you're using. So a good couple of sets of gloves is always a must for me on the trap line. I like to bring a shovel. This is a compact foldable shovel right here, so always just good to have one. You never know if you might get stuck and you might need to dig yourself out, or if you want to dig some dirt up. Whatever reason, it's always good to have a shovel. I don't normally keep one in my trap bag because I'm normally dealing with sand, but this is something that I could stick in there if I find a spot that needs it. Here's something that I don't use quite as much as I used to, but they're still good to have. I wouldn't say you need them, but I used to use them, and I still have a couple, so I keep in my bin just in case. These right here are literally just a hose that I've cut into several sections. Then I just put a nail through there. That way you could stick your lure in there and then easily relure the trap, like so. That way the lure's in there. I don't use them quite as much as I used to, because I use Y sticks now, and I think it just helps the lure to get a better airflow throughout. So I prefer using Y sticks now, but these are still a good suggestion, and a lot of people do find success in them as well. So there's something to think about. Here's a brush, and this is normally for foothold trapping to kind of clear the path, but you can also use this in cage trapping as well. Something maybe just to think about. This is something that I always recommend people get: a good size sifter, a little small one that you maybe can fit inside the cage trap. Most of the times I don't need it because I have a lot of sand where I trap. I usually trap in dry riverbeds and washes, so we've got nice fine dirt and ground. But this would be good if you're in a rockier area or somewhere where dirt is a little bit more scarce, and you want to make sure that area in front of the trap is easy to step on for that critter. So a good sifter, always good to have, but I don't normally keep this in my trap bag just for weight sake. Maybe an extra pair of loppers if you lose your other ones. I've got a big pair that I keep with me as I go and set traps, but a small little pair of shears, it's good to have them there just in case you lose yours or something else happens. Good to have these. Again, I don't keep these in my bag, but I keep them around in the truck just in case. Already mentioned the locks that I have, and these are really cool because they all have the same key, so I don't have to ever worry about losing the key or remembering which key goes to which lock. They all have the same key. I will have a link for these and almost everything here in the description below, so if you guys want to look into getting any of this equipment, it'll all be in Amazon, and hopefully this will help you guys. And an extra pair of pliers is always good to have whenever you're out trapping, so I keep those both in the bag and in here. A little hatchet here. Of course, I'm bringing loppers whenever I go, but maybe if it's some extra difficult wood to cut for brush, not a bad idea to keep a hatchet on hand. The rest of this bin is just filled with duplicates, extra cable, for example, or extra lure tubes. Alright, now moving on. I guess we'll take a look at this cage trap real quick, as it's the next thing in my truck bed. This is one of Mercer Lawing's camp trip cages. That's where I get all of my cages up until this point. During the summer, I might end up building some cages with a buddy of mine, because you can get them for a cheaper price if you do build them yourself. But Mercer's been a great friend of mine, and he builds an awesome cage trap, very lightweight, very affordable for what work he puts into it and the materials that cost him. So just a really sound overall product and not very difficult to use. A little run through of it here is you lift up the door, make sure the lock is out of the way, then you push just cam forward here, and then there you go. So normally though, what I'll do here, and another cool thing about these cages, is you have a bolt here where you can adjust the pan tension. So as you saw right there, I just tapped on the back of it, the door fell. Normally you don't want that to happen, and that's why you've got this pan tension feature, which is super important, super helpful. Just another one of the many reasons I love Mercer's cage traps. So that's where I get my cages. I'll link his Facebook page where he's most active in the description, so if you guys want to contact him through there, he definitely is one of the best cage trap providers in all of the West, so definitely a good product, and that's what I use for all of my cage traps. I always carry a bucket here, a 5-gallon bucket, and this right here is full of my attractants. So that includes my feather boa, and I will always have a bag maybe like this in my main trapping bag with feather boa and other interesting attractants, like some shiny stuff and like maybe a cat toy or two, just to mix it up a bit. And then I'll always have a pillow, and I'll show you how that works all when we get to setting the cage traps. But I always have this in my 5-gallon bucket, and then the rest of this is all from the actual sets where I've either caught a cat or moved on. But I always remember to bring the fur and extra stuff that's in there in that cage trap back with me. Obviously you can't litter while you're setting traps, that's illegal, so it's always good to take all that stuff A lot of it, especially right here, I've got a cat turd, and that's obviously from a cage that ended up catching a bobcat. So you can collect that stuff, and a lot of it has good scent to it. And I just find that if it's stuck in there with each other, it mixes up, and there's a lot of good scent when you put it into the next cage trap. So that's what I like to use. I always have a good 5-gallon bucket full of it, so I can, for example, get a Ziploc bag, fill it with some pillow feathers, put a couple of attractants in there, and then go ahead and throw that into my actual trapping bag. And that way it won't be as much of a load to carry a whole 5-gallon bucket. So this is something that will stay in the truck, but very helpful later on down the line. Always remember to keep a lid with that 5-gallon bucket, because otherwise you're going to have a lot of people mad behind you if you're not careful, and you'll have pillow feathers flying behind you. I've unfortunately had that happen to me, and I always remember to bring a lid. This right here is one of the more important things in cage trapping. This is my locker box, and this is all of the stuff that really is going to be catching your cats for you. So I'm going to go a quick run through. Again, the links for all these items will be in the description below if you want to check them out and potentially buy them for yourselves. I highly recommend all these products. This is some of Mercer Lawing's Cage Magic lead-in scent. Love using this stuff, Cage Magic lead-in scent. I don't have any right now, but normally this one would be full of Bobcat Urine. This is an extra bottle, just good to maybe have it if you want to start collecting urine yourself, or whatever it may be. So another extra bottle is always good to have on hand. And then here's my lures. This stuff here is Mercer Lawing's Spellbound lure. I find it pretty useful. It's good stuff. I always have some Bobcat gland lures, so whenever you get lures, I think a gland lure is one of the more important things, especially during breeding season, when, you know, smelling another cat is really important to bobcats. So some gland lure, good stuff. I like to use a call lure. The call lure that I use is some Skunk. A lot of trappers don't like it because it really does, it's effective, and it stays even after you've pulled that set. I personally made this one myself. This is from petroleum jelly mixed in with just a little bit of skunk essence collected straight from a skunk that I had caught. So good stuff right here, the skunk essence. Normally I'm wearing gloves when I'm touching all this stuff because I'm gonna smell like it right after this now. This is Love Potion number 9, another one of Mercer Lawing's lures. I think it's another good lure, especially during breeding season, but just all year round I always put a little bit of that in my cage trap. And then I like to use a mink. This is not a mink lure, but I like to use a little bit of mink glands. You could also use muskrat glands, or even like a little bit of beaver castor. And what I think that does is it just provides a curiosity factor, especially you can see how dry it is out here. Obviously we don't have water, and hence we don't have muskrats or beaver. And I think just that smell of something weird provides a curiosity factor to the cats. So I always like to have a little bit of mink gland lure. I'll have the link for that in the description as well. And then the last lure I like to have is a paste bait. So right here, this is Mark June's Widowmaker, and I put a good dollop of that in the cage trap as well. I'll show you that as I make the set. So those are the different lures I use. Again, links will be in the description below. I don't think you need quite this many lures if you're just starting out, but it certainly won't hurt. And just getting a good couple of lures and getting, trying and experimenting and seeing what works best for your kind of country and your kind of critters, I think that's the best way to do it. So anyway, that's what I use for lures. One more thing, and I haven't tried these out personally, but a friend of mine vouches for them, and he gave me a pack of these, so shout out to you. Thank you, Jason. But these are some wool daubers, and he uses them in the cage trap. You put the lure on the little dauber, and I think apparently it collects it very well and holds and stores that lure well. And then you'd put it through these mesh bars on the cage. And to me, that sounds like a really good idea. I haven't personally tested them out, so I can't vouch for it, but definitely might be something you might want to consider. Alright, and finally, here is my trapping bag. This is pretty simple. It's literally a bag my dad got on a work trip. Super cheap, but that's probably what you want. You don't want to be spending something expensive unless you find it more comfortable for you. But I find this more than comfortable enough, and it's very cheap. It's going to get stinky, it's going to get messy, dirty, probably going to get ripped at some point, but it does the job. So that's what I'm using here. I'm going to open it up and just kind of pull everything out. So what I'll do is I'll get lure from here, I'll get attractants from here, and I'll get whatever necessary tools from here, and then I'll throw it in this bag, all right? But there are a couple of things that I have 100% of the time in this bag. They don't leave the bag. For example, this garden trowel here, I love this. The link for this will be in the description as well. It's really nice, it's really small, and it's got a great grip on it, and it works really well if you're trying to plow up some soil to set the cage trap in. So I always have that in the trap bag. I always keep one or two of those cables for tying off one of my traps, as well as a lock, because without a lock, the cable really doesn't do a whole lot for me. So a lock and a cable, always good to keep that in there. Pair of gloves, always essential. Good pair of needle nose pliers for either cutting wire, adjusting that pan tension bolt. Always good to have a good pair of pliers with you out on the line. And then these here are actually what I use more commonly for that pan tension bolt. They do it a little bit better. And you know, just any adjustments you need to make with bolts or whatever, these are the ones I use for that. So good couple sets of pliers. Got a good roll of wire here. I love this. This is like 32 gauge, I think, maybe 18 gauge. But pretty thin, pretty flimsy, but it does the job well for hanging up attractants in the back of the cage trap, and I'll show you how I do that as soon as we get into the actual setup of the cage traps. So always good to have wire. Another thing, and here's that lock that I was telling you guys about. Good to have that in there all the time. Looks like we're pretty empty. Normally what I'll do, and if you guys couldn't tell, it's actually not trapping season. This video is being filmed a little bit later, outside the season, so I'm not in full form yet. But what I'll normally do is I'll have my attractants bag and my pillow feather bag inside my trapping bag at the same time. If I need extras, I'll come here. Normally, I'll have a little bit of both in my trapping bag, like so. And then this right here is where I'll have my, and see, there you go. I didn't even notice that, but I've got my trapping attractants up here. Normally here is where I'll put my lures. It's summertime right now, so it's not a good reason for me to have my lures outside of the shop where it's cool. But normally I'll have my lures here during trapping season, and then I'll have my attractants and tools in this compartment. So that's pretty much what I'm rocking with when I'm out there every day in the line. Wear it just like a backpack, and yeah. I also carry a nice set of loppers. I think having a good pair of loppers is important, and it really saves you some time. I had some smaller ones, but just not very sharp, not very powerful loppers. And as soon as I changed to these, the speed increased drastically. So I'd recommend getting a good set of loppers, and I always bring these with me as I'm walking to each and every trap. So that's pretty much what I'm rocking with. Garden trowel, lures, attractants, extra tools, gloves, cable, lock, wires, needle nose pliers, and then normal pliers, specifically for adjusting that pan tension bolt. And that's pretty much what I'm rocking with. Alright, so we're about ready to set a cage trap here. Another important thing to consider, and you guys, I'm sure, all have thought about this a little bit, but one important thing is the location, because if you don't have a good location where a cat is going to be walking through, you're simply not going to catch the cat. It's pretty much that simple. So I think the most important thing is location, and I do want to do an entire video focusing on locations, because there are just so many different types of locations and so many different things to consider when finding a location. But I'll kind of give a couple steps real quick here. One thing I think is important is kind of considering your wind direction, and that could be thermal. So maybe if you're in a valley, consider putting the back of your cage trap facing upward. That way the wind blowing downward comes through the front of your cage trap. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing just in general is wind direction. So if you're in a flat area, see where the prevailing wind is coming from. Try to focus on that. That'll give you your best shot at having the lure's scent be pushed from the back of the cage to the front of the cage, and that way the cat or whatever critter you're targeting has the best chance of smelling your lure and becoming intrigued with it. So that would be a big thing I would think is important when you're locating your specific area where you want to place your cage. Now, in terms of the bigger picture, that is what I want to focus on in a later video. So stick around for that. Subscribe if you haven't already, and that video will be coming out hopefully pretty soon. But today we're going to be focusing on just the specific trap placement and the trap setup. So right here I found this pretty nice spot. It has some of this pretty pokey stuff, but that's pretty much what I deal with every day out here in the desert. But it is good because it has a little bit of shade for that animal, and it's going to be easier for us to collect brush to cover up the cage. So first what I like to do is I like to actually make a little trap bed, and I kind of want it to be like right here. So we're going to open up our bag, pull up our garden trowel. You're going to see how useful this becomes just really quickly here. We'll pull the stuff here off the ground. I can already tell that there's some cactus down here, so I'm trying to avoid that. And this thing just tears up the ground really quickly, so it's super helpful with that. There's my shoe there. Just kind of flatten it out pretty good. Having a stable trap bed is really important. So then what I'll do is I'll get my cage, 2 hands. I personally think that is a good spot for that cage. This here, as you can tell, there's some tinsel here. I don't prefer to have it on there. I did have it in one set where it was pretty far. I didn't have any flagging with me, and this would help me see it if it was up or down from the road. But normally I prefer to have flagging. I feel like this maybe draws even a little bit too much attention away from the inside of the cage and keeps it on the outside of the cage. So we'll pull this off for now, and I'll probably come back with some flagging. The next step for me is to make sure the whole bed of that trap is nice and smooth. So a lot of this stuff has prickers or whatever, so I'm going to pull it out of the way and search for that softer ground. Looks like there's some good dirt right here. We're going to put that in the front of the cage trap. I think that's about good for the front of the cage trap right there. It looks really nice and smooth. Alright, next step is we're going to cover this entire cage a little bit more with some brush to make it a little bit more enclosed, a little bit more like a cave, and that it's harder to use, to smell the lures that are back there without being in that front of the area where we want them to walk through. Alright, so I picked up a good amount of brush here, and we're going to put this on the side of the cage that I think needs it the most. There we go, that looks a lot better. Pull this little chunk off here. Go ahead and put that right here. Alright, so I got all the brush covering the cage trap. I think that's how I like it. There's a little bit of room in the front where it's not completely covered. I think that's fine. You just want to cover up the back as much as possible, and I'd consider that a good job. Alright, so the next step is going to be adding the baits and lures as well as the attractants into the cage trap. I'm just going to show you how I do it. Right now I've got some straw or hay, whatever you guys want to call it, and we're going to go ahead and mix that up with some of these pillow feathers. And this is really purely visual. The scent really has nothing to do with it, but it is a good visual, I think, in the back of the cage trap to have a bird's nest in the back of the cage trap. So mix up those twigs with your feathers, and then I'm just going to really throw that in the back there. I'm going to pull out our feather boa here. This one already has been attached to a piece of wire, so I use my needle nose pliers, cut a chunk of that wire off the spool and cut a little bit of that feather boa. And that's how I like to run my attractants. And then I'm gonna go put that in there and then hang it up on one of the wire mesh bars. Alright, so I got that all hung up. I think that looks good. Alright, so I'm about ready to go ahead and put some lure and bait into the trap. But before I do that, I want to show you something that I found effective as I've been trapping out here in the desert. I think something that's really important for me, something I've been doing pretty consistently for the last couple of years now, is getting bobcat scat. Now you can find this in the actual animal after you dispatch him, or of course you can find it where they've been, and wherever you get it works just the same way. I get a little bit of it, just about this size, not very long, a couple inches maybe, and I'll try to put that as another like stepping stone toward the end goal. For example, you've got your lead-in scent, which is going to eventually be in the front of that cage trap, and I think the second thing would be this little piece of bobcat scat that they can kind of smell, and we're just trying to get them closer and closer, trying to keep their attention span fixed inside the cage. And I think putting a little bit of bobcat scat, maybe a little squirt of urine on that scat, goes a long way in doing that. So I'll put that right here, stick it in there. It's pretty simple, but I think it goes, and I think it does a lot for me. So I enjoy doing that, and I think I've had success because of it. We're gonna go ahead and throw a couple of lures in the back of the cage here. I use Y sticks. That is the case, except for my paste bait. Normally for the paste bait, it's not as much smell as it is actually like a bait. It's meat. As you can look in there, nice and juicy. So what I'll do is I'll get a stick here, get a decent gob of that stuff, about this much or so, and I'll put that back there in that bird's nest. So either I'll throw it back there when I throw the feathers and the straw, or I'll throw it in later when I'm putting the lures in. Either way, put it back in the bird's nest there. That's just the way I've done it, and it's worked for me, so I'm going to keep on doing it that way. Now we're going to go ahead and put the rest of our lures in with Y sticks, but I guess I'll use one of these little cotton swabs. Thanks again, Jason, for these. These are pretty cool. We'll go ahead and give that a try. So I'm just going to open up my lure case, dip it in like so. Look at that. That looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and put those through the top right there of the cage. So what I probably need to do with this one, because I don't think it's quite long enough to get to hold itself up on these bars. Yeah, it's not. So I'll probably get a stick or something that'll help me do that, like this. So it'll look like this at the end. So I'm gonna go ahead, turn the camera off. I'm gonna get the lures placed in there. Just know it's gonna be exactly like this. They're all gonna be in that area right between the pan and the back of the cage trap. I think that's a sweet spot for me where I place my lures. So I'll get some Y sticks and then I'll place that one in there as well. And that's what I do for all of my lures except that paste bait. Alright, so now that we've got the lures in the back on those Y sticks, we're gonna go ahead and finish the job off as far as luring goes. And we're gonna put some of this Cage Magic lead-in scent. And as mentioned before, I like to put a little stream of that from just about the front of that cage trap all the way to about the middle or the back of that pan. And that seems to work really well for me, so they can kind of follow that scent in onto that piece of bobcat scat, maybe focus their attention on that. And then by then, I think they smell the lures and they see that attractant, and that really strikes their curiosity. And at that time, if you get them, past that piece of scat right there, you've normally caught them 99% of the time. So congratulations if you're there. And a little bit of bobcat urine, I'm not going to use it today, but same thing, little squirt, little line there of bobcat urine to finish it up. And that's about it for the set. Very simple, nothing crazy. Normally I'm a lot quicker going through these, but I figured I'd slow it down to give the best explanation possible for each thing I do here. And then to finish it off, go ahead and put that cage door back on, Always remember to keep the bar, if you're using one of Mercer's cage traps, they've got a bar on the front side, the back side doesn't have one, so keep that bar in front, otherwise you're going to get it stuck and it's going to end up like this. You'll have a bobcat come through and you'll have this in the morning when you're walking and checking your cage trap. So always keep that bar pointing this way. So do that, pull the cam forward, and there you go. You've set your cage trap. So that's how I do it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely want to come up with more videos in the future. Like I said, I want to do a locations video. But hopefully this was helpful and informative to all of you. Thank you guys so much for watching. And without further ado, we'll see you on the next one.